Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show Live. I'm Dr. Aimee, and today I'm joined by Ashlee Laroue. She's a nurse, founder, and CEO of Fertilitease. We're going to cover why Ashlee created this company, how it works, and 3 practical tips you can start using tonight. Grab your notebook, let's be real, your notes app, and let's dive in. Hi, Ashlee. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, so nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I want you to share your why. You worked as a fertility nurse for years. What was the moment in your career that made you say patients need this? And for people who are brand new to your work, can you share what Fertilitease is?
So I think it's a culmination of all of that that really gave me a really unique perspective. I've done labor and delivery, I've done MFM, obstetrics, and my last 8 years have been in fertility. Having a coach that's a nurse, we've seen the inside and the outside of it, right? So we see the way kind of the current healthcare system works, and nurses not having enough time to truly spend time explaining things. There may be portal messages or voicemails that are going unanswered because they're trying to get through so many patients. There's a lot of waiting in fertility in general or in the reproductive space. And so on the patient side, what I saw are patients overwhelmed between visits, after hours. And so they're turning to social media, Dr. Google, which, as we all know, doesn't always have the best information. I mean, there's people like you on here that are doing amazing work, but there's a lot of misinformation and it's not super personalized. So it was like, what if people could take a nurse home? What
Yeah.
if they had a nurse in their back pocket that they could reach out to after hours in between visits where you're getting real support, real information? And so you just are less overwhelmed. You have that person going through this. You feel less alone during the process. So all of that kind of came together over my years of experience. And I've had this idea for a really long time. And I was like, it's not out there right now. So let me try and see if I can create it.
Yeah. So my patients, I know it's not typical of other clinics. They all get my cell phone number. I FaceTime them when they do their shots. But I hear the stories where they tell me that they got no support, no one-on-one injection training. They were just told to basically go online and watch videos. If I were a patient going through IVF, even if as a doctor, it would be very overwhelming for me, you know,
Extremely.
like
Yeah,
like,
100%.
to expect patients. And the medications are so expensive. And, if you make a wrong move, you could potentially be wasting like $1,000, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
easily.
yeah. So share with us, what are some of your favorite injection tips to make the process less painful?
So I have a lot of them. Sometimes it really depends on the medication too. And that's kind of what the personalized support really comes down to. Step one is you get your medication in the mail, and it's just doing that initial inventory and organizing yourself. What needle goes with what syringe, with what medication. When it comes time to actually doing those injections, it's a game changer. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had clients call or patients call and say, oh, I'm missing this needle, or I'm missing this syringe, and I didn't even realize it. So I think that's a great way to initially minimize that panic, is just getting yourself organized in the beginning. And I teach my patients to practice. And I know that sounds weird. I'm not saying practice on yourself, but you can actually we take saline and we inject into a pillow, or we inject into something. So you just get the feel of drawing up something. You get the feel of pushing that syringe down for the first time. So you're not actually, injecting yourself for the first time of practicing with that needle. And again, that just it's a game changer. You're not doing it. It just eases the anxiety so much.
What about the pain of the shot? Do you have any tips about that?
I like icing. I do give a time limit on icing just because I don't want you to like freeze that subcutaneous tissue or anything like that. But I do think icing is the cheapest and fastest, easy way to minimize pain. Just numbing that area initially and then kind of warming it up after, massaging it a little bit.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's distraction, injecting in any position you would like to. I get the question all the time, do I have to be standing, sitting? That really doesn't matter. Find whatever comfortable position works for you and do your injection. And then just finding that support person is really helpful as well. It doesn't mean they have to necessarily inject you, but maybe just having a conversation while you're doing your injections, you're distracting yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Have you ever found things like the Buzzy Bee or, those like tools that vibrate help at all?
I've had some patients that I've recommended that for. So for those who don't know, the Buzzy Bee is basically just a little vibrating device that you can just put on your skin where you're going to do the injection. And it kind of tricks your nerves and your skin. It's just like, you feel that vibration even after you take it off. So then when you do your injection, your body's sort of confused that vibration's happening and you don't feel the pain quite so much. So yeah, great trick.
And do you have any tips on protocol literacy? Like you get your protocol, like what do you do? Like how can you educate yourself about like what you're going through, why you're taking what you're taking?
I think it's breaking it down. It feels very massive, right? The protocol's like, okay, you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to add this. And then we don't know when we're going to bring you in for your appointment because it depends on your response to it. And so it feels very big and overwhelming if you just get dunked on with this whole giant protocol. So I think one of the biggest tips and what I like to do when I break it down is let's break it up into bite-sized chunks. What's happening first? What do we need you to understand first? And then, okay, is now a good time to start talking about the next steps? Or does it make sense to maybe pause that conversation? Let's get you over your baseline, your suppression check, get you over those first injections, and then let's start talking about what comes next or what's after that. So I sort of take the lead of clients that I'm working with on, how much do you want to know right now? Because explaining an entire protocol is a lot. So I take the lead there. And then I think breaking it down into bite-sized chunks makes it a little bit more palatable in that moment and makes it a lot easier to understand. And I think just explaining the why. I think a lot of times what gets missed in a busy clinic environment is the why. And sometimes when you explain the why, it just kind of all comes together and starts making a lot more sense. So I think there's power in that.
Yeah, 100%. And what about the emotional part? I mean, this whole process is so emotional. What kind of recommendations you have to promote emotional steadiness?
This is different for everybody. For some people, it's finding that community, right? So for some people, they're wanting to surround themselves with other people going through very similar process. So for some, that's going to be social media. For some, that's finding a support group. For some, that's just their inner circle, whatever that looks like, whoever they're comfortable sharing their journey with. So I think, finding whoever that is, whatever sort of works best for you, I think that provides that emotional grounding. I'm a big advocate for talking to somebody if you feel comfortable. I think seeing somebody who specializes in reproductive therapy just goes a really long way. And I don't push it by any means, but I think there's something to be said for just talking through your emotions and your feelings with someone who's very unbiased, who can provide tools and tips that you may not be getting from that community. And it's very personalized to you and your journey, and even things maybe you're not sharing with that community.
Yeah. And what kind of recommendations do you have for preparing for a consult or preparing for a follow-up for your clients?
Yeah, I think step one, have a conversation, whether that's with your fertilities coach, whether that's with your partner, whether that's with your little community. I think as you're getting ready, whatever's that next step is, and you're going into that appointment, I think sometimes just talking it out beforehand gets your mind clear. Okay, here's the things I really need to ask. Here's where I'm still missing on the clarity. Here's what I get, here's what I don't. So I think just getting on the same page with your partner, having that initial conversation, talking to your coach, just sort of gets that all in line. So you go into that appointment with your provider very prepared. I think the second thing is write down your questions. White coat syndrome is very real. Even if you really like your provider and you're not scared of them by any means, you just get in front of them and you start having a conversation, and it goes a different way and you completely forget the questions that you wanted to ask. So I'm a huge advocate for writing down those questions you really want asked, so in the moment you're ready, you're prepared, you're not forgetting them. And I think there's power in bringing somebody with you if possible, whether that's a partner, bringing them into the fold, whether that is somebody that you've told about this, especially if it's a big appointment or potentially a hard appointment. I think it's important to have another set of ears that can also help you during those appointments.
Yeah. I also tell my patients to record our sessions.
Yeah.
Otter.ai is a good recording tool, and then it will transcribe, the conversation so you can have it. Obviously, tell the doctor, ask them, is it okay if I
Yeah.
record this? I tell all my patients that they have a blanket permission to record everything all the time so that they can always have it. That way, they're not like busy jotting notes the whole time and saying, like, oh, can you spell that again? This way,
Yep.
of course, they can ask me that too. But that's one tip that I share with my patients. So, what advice do you have for patients who have a partner? And what role should they play as a patient's going through IVF?
Yeah, I love this question. I think attending appointments, being present and an active participant is huge. Sperm is, if your partner has testicles, sperm is half the piece of the puzzle. So I think it's really important for them to be a very active participant in what's going on. With that, if there's lifestyle changes that need to happen, I think making them together will make everybody more successful. If you're
Yeah.
trying to diet and do all this stuff, but your partner's not and eating all the junk food and oh my gosh, it looks so delicious, you're not going to be as successful. So, making any lifestyle changes, exercising together, making dietary changes together just makes it a little bit easier. Injection support is a one we see a lot, having your partner do your injections. But I think another piece is maintenance. So, calling the pharmacy on behalf of your partner so they don't have to and spend 30 minutes on the phone with the pharmacy when they're already stressed. Additional logistical management. So dealing with the insurance company, scheduling appointments, I think that can be really, really useful. Celebrating little wins together, not going through this in a silo. You're going through it together. Here's a little win, and let's celebrate that together, whatever that looks like. I think one of the things I see that's sort of missing a lot of times is communication. It's super simple, but just communicating, being on the same page, having conversations of what are we comfortable with? What are we not comfortable with? And when you're creating questions and appointments or portaling or whatever, you're going into that, together. And I think the last thing, which may be one of the most important too, is doing things outside of fertility. Fertility is so overwhelming and it takes over your life and you're thinking about it all the time. And part of the reason you're going through treatment is to create that family with somebody else. And that is the other half of you of why you're doing this. So I think it's really important to take that step back, nurture your relationship, do things outside of fertility, go on date nights, talk about something else. Those are probably my top tips. And I'm pretty passionate about that.
Yeah, totally. And keep it fun, keep it funny, trying to
Sure.
find the humor. I find that the couples that do the best, they just try and make each other laugh.
Yeah.
Uh, and I try
Or
and keep things light and fun too, because
yeah.
fertility, like you said, it's heavy stuff. It's really serious, but you get through a little bit easier if you try and make it not as serious. Tell me where, people out there can find you if they want to work with your company and get the support from you if they need it.
Yeah, so you could obviously, like, follow, and share on social media. Obviously helps to get the word out. We do put out some educational stuff, which is evidence-based, which kind of helps to cut through the noise, like you do, to try and help with that. So, and you obviously can link to anything on there. Feel free to DM me. And we do have a website, which is just fertilitease.com. You can
Yeah.
head to our website. We have very transparent pricing and packaging. Everything's on there. I'm not hiding anything. Fertility is expensive enough. So I think you'll find that what we offer is very flexible, very affordable, and very approachable.
Okay. And then what do you guys do? Break it down for me.
Yeah, so we basically have three pillars of service that we offer. So the first pillar, or like the base, I like to call it, is on-demand texting. So you literally get your dedicated nurse's phone number and you text back and forth with your nurse for those demand questions, for those after hours when life's happening, when something comes up and it's very stressful and you need answers. That's kind of the base of it. And then we also provide one-on-one coaching. That's self-scheduled. And that looks different for everybody, right? Depending on the level of support and what they want. So that's the second layer. And then the third layer is injection support. So we offer virtual injection teaching. A lot of our patients have a lot of anxiety with needles and syringes, and you get this giant box of medication in the mail. And, maybe you get a video or two and you're like, okay, here you go. Figure out how to do this. And so what I really found is some personalized, dedicated virtual injection teaching just eases so much anxiety. And what I'll even do is come on and watch you do your first injections, which again, you just have a nurse in your home in that moment watching you do your injections for the first time. That's game changing for a lot of people that have a lot of stress around it. So those are kind of the three main tiers of what the support looks like, and it can be tailored to what the patient needs.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ashlee. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for making the life of patients all over as easy as possible as they're doing something that can be really hard and difficult. So thank you for your time. And I'm so glad that we found each other so that I can tell more people about you so that they can work with you if needed.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you so much for having me.
Welcome. Of course. Thanks, Ashlee.
All right,
Have a
take
good
care.
one. You too.
Bye.